In the heart of Burgundy, where rolling vineyards unfurl like a verdant tapestry beneath the gentle slopes of the Côte d'Or, lies the ancient city of Dijon, once known as Divio in Roman times. Here, at the crossroads of history and fate, stands the Abbey of Saint-Benigne, a monument to centers of spiritual devotion, architectural ambition, and cultural transformation. Its story is not merely one of stone and mortar, but a profound narrative woven into the fabric of Burgundian identity, reflecting the region's passage through the tumult of empires, the fervor of religious reform, and the crucible of revolution. To trace the history of this abbey is to follow a thread through the intricate weave of medieval Europe where faith, power, and art converged in a singular edifice dedicated to Saint Benigne, the martyr whose name it bears. The origins of the abbey are shrouded in the mists of late antiquity, rooted in the early Christianization of Gaul. Tradition holds that Saint Benigne, a 2nd century martyr, was an evangelizer of Burgundy, possibly a disciple of Polycarp of Smyrna, sent to spread the Christian faith in a land still steeped in Gallo-Roman paganism. His martyrdom at Dijon around 179 left a sacred legacy, and by the early 6th century his tomb became a focal point of veneration. In 511, under the reign of Clovis I, the Merovingian king who united much of Gaul under Christian rule, Saint Gregory, Bishop of Langres, constructed a crypt to house Benigne's sarcophagus, a magnificent Roman relic that local tradition revered despite initial skepticism from ecclesiastical authorities. Gregory's vision, spurred by a divine apparition of the saint himself, led to the erection of a basilica above this crypt consecrated in 535. This early structure, modest yet hallowed, marked the genesis of the abbey, a beacon of faith outside the fortified castrum of Divio, in a landscape where the sound murmured and the vines began their slow conquest of the hills. By 871, the basilica had fallen into disrepair, but Bishop Isaac of Langres breathed new life into the site, restoring the church and establishing a Benedictine monastery around it. This act anchored the abbey as a spiritual and economic force, its monks cultivating the surrounding lands and drawing pilgrims to the martyr's tomb. The abbey's early history, however, was one of quiet endurance, its significance overshadowed by the great monastic centers of the Carolingian era. It was not until the late 10th century, under the reforming zeal of the Cluniac movement, that Saint Benigne's star would rise. In 989, Bruno of Roussy, Bishop of Langres, invited the order of Cluny to reform the abbey, and Mayol, the revered abbot of Cluny, dispatched a cadre of 12 monks led by William of Volpiano, a figure whose architectural and spiritual vision would transform the site into a monument of enduring grandeur. William of Volpiano, a Piedmontese monk of noble descent, arrived in Dijon in 990, bringing with him the rigor and ambition of Cluniac reform. Under his leadership, the abbey underwent a radical transformation, both spiritual and material. In 1001, he and Bruno embarked on an audacious project, the construction of a new basilica described by contemporaries as Mirabiliorem Basilicis totius Gallia, the most wondrous of all the basilicas of Gaul. This was no mere church, but a complex of 3 sanctuaries, a subterranean crypt for Benigne's relics, a ground-level church for worship, and a 3-story rotunda behind the choir, a masterpiece of early Romanesque architecture. With 104 columns on the ground floor and 121 above, the basilica featured double-vaulted side L and galleries, its design echoing the grandeur of Cluny II, while introducing innovations that would shape the Romanesque style. William's meticulous oversight ensured that every stone was laid with liturgical and symbolic precision, reflecting the Cluniac ideal of a monastery as a microcosm of divine order. By 1016, the community had grown from 12 to 80 monks, supported by the patronage of regional lords like Otto William, Count of Mâcon, whose donations restored the abbey's temporal wealth. The 11th century marked the abbey's apogee, a period when it stood as a beacon of Romanesque art and monastic discipline. Its rotunda, circular marble some 90 meters in diameter, was a testament to William's architectural genius, its 3 levels symbolizing the triune nature of God and the ascent of the soul. The abbey's scriptorium and library flourished, preserving texts and fostering intellectual exchange while its lands expanded through careful stewardship. Yet its independence from Cluny allowed it to carve a distinct identity, blending Burgundian traditions with the universal aspirations of Benedictine reform. The Romanesque crypt, with its cubic capitals and sculptured columns, remains one of the oldest surviving monastic structures in France, a silent witness to this golden age. The 13th century brought new challenges and transformations. In 1271, the original basilica collapsed, prompting a reconstruction in the emergent Gothic style between 1280 and 1393. Under Abbot Hugh of Arques, the abbey acquired lands to fund this ambitious project, which produced a soaring nave with pointed arches and ribbed vaults, emblematic of Burgundian Gothic. The new church, dedicated in 1393, retained the crypt and rotunda, but embraced the verticality and light of the Gothic aesthetic, aligning Saint-Benigne with the architectural trends of Champagne and Ile-de-France. This period also saw Dijon's rise as the capital of the Duchy of Burgundy, under the Valois dukes, whose patronage enriched the region's cultural landscape. The abbey, though no longer the sole spiritual center, remained a vital institution, its monks navigating the tensions between ducal power and ecclesiastical autonomy. The 17th century ushered in another phase of renewal under the Congregation of Saint-Maur, a Benedictine reform movement that introduced classical architectural elements to the abbey's cloisters and buildings. These transformations, however, were overshadowed by the cataclysm of the French Revolution. In 1791, the revolutionary government dissolved religious orders and the last monks were expelled. The abbey's church, already a parish since 1792, was elevated to cathedral status in 1813, replacing the desecrated Saint-Étienne. Much of the monastic complex was destroyed, leaving only the Romanesque crypt and fragments of the Gothic structure. The rotunda, once the pride of William's vision, was largely dismantled, its stones scattered in the revolutionary fervor. In 1930, the abbey's remnants found new purpose as the Dijon Archaeological Museum, housing artifacts from Burgundy's ancient and medieval past, including Romanesque tympana and a head of Christ attributed to Klaus Sluter. The cathedral, classified as a historical monument of France in 1862, with a crypt protected since 1846, continues to dominate Dijon's skyline, its polychrome Burgundian roof tiles glinting in the sun. The crypt, with its ancient columns and the sarcophagus of Saint-Benigne, remains a place of pilgrimage, its cool shadows evoking the faith of Gregory, the ambition of William, and the resilience of a community that endured through centuries of upheaval. The Abbey of Saint-Benigne is more than a relic of the past. It is a palimpsest of Burgundy's history inscribed with the aspirations of martyrs, monks, and dukes. From its Merovingian origins to its Cluniac reform, from Gothic splendor to revolutionary ruin, it embodies the region's spiritual and cultural evolution. Its stones, weathered yet enduring, speak of a fate that shaped a landscape, a city that became a capital, and an art that transcended time. In Dijon, where the scent of mustard and wine lingers in the air, the abbey stands as a testament to the enduring interplay of sacred and secular, monument to a Burgundy that is both eternal and ever-changing. In the rolling hills of Burgundy, where the Gausne River carves a gentle path through fertile plains, the Cluny Abbey emerged in 1910 as a beacon of spiritual and cultural transformation, its story woven into the fabric of medieval Europe's religious, political, and artistic evolution. Founded by William I, Duke of Aquitaine, known as William the Pious, the abbey was a deliberate act of devotion, a gift to the Church free from secular interference. William's charter, a document of profound foresight, declared that Cluny would answer solely to the papacy, a radical assertion of independence in an era when local lords and bishops often meddled in monastic affairs. This autonomy, coupled with a return to the strict observance of the Benedictine rule, set Cluny apart as a crucible for reform, radiating influence across a fractured Christendom. The abbey's early years were shaped by its first abbot, Bernard of Beaume, whose ascetic rigor and organizational acumen laid a foundation for Cluny's rapid ascent. Under his successors, particularly Otto 927-942, and Maiolus 954-994, Cluny became a model of monastic discipline, emphasizing prayer, manual labor, and intellectual pursuit in a world often marred by violence and instability. The rule of Saint Benedict, with its balance of ora et labora, prayer and work, was not merely followed, but revitalized at Cluny. Its daily rhythms of liturgy and contemplation performed with a precision that captivated the imagination of reformers. By the late 10th century, Cluny's reputation for piety and order attracted the attention of kings, nobles, and bishops, who sought its guidance to purify their own monasteries. This sparked the Cluniac reform, a movement that would eventually bind hundreds of monasteries across Europe into a network under Cluny's spiritual and administrative orbit. The 11th century marked Cluny's apogee, particularly under the Abbacy of Odilo, 994-1049, and Hugh of Semur, 1049-1109, whose combined tenures spanned over a century and cemented the abbey's role as a powerhouse of medieval Christendom. Odilo, a figure of immense charisma and diplomatic skill, expanded Cluny's influence by fostering ties with the Holy Roman Emperors and the papacy, while also introducing the Feast of All Souls, a liturgical innovation that deepened the Church's engagement with the lady's spiritual concerns. Hugh, later canonized, oversaw the construction of Cluny III, the third and most ambitious iteration of the Abbey Church, began in 1088. This architectural marvel, completed in the early 12th century, was the largest church in Christendom until St. Peter's Basilica surpassed it centuries later. Its vast nave, soaring vaults, and intricate Romanesque sculpture embodied Cluny's spiritual ambition, a physical manifestation of the abbey's role as a bridge between earth and heaven. Cluny III was not merely a building but a statement of cultural and intellectual dominance. The abbey's scriptorium produced manuscripts of breathtaking artistry, their illuminated pages blending Carolingian precision with Burgundian flair, preserving classical texts and theological treatises alike. Monks at Cluny were scholars as much as ascetics, their library a repository of knowledge that rivaled the great centers of learning in Baghdad or Constantinople. The abbey's liturgy, enriched with elaborate chants and extended offices, became a model for monastic worship, its complexity reflecting a theology that saw beauty as a path to the divine. Yet this grandeur was not without cost. The resources required to sustain Cluny's vast enterprises, its lands, vineyards, and dependent priories, drew criticism from those who saw its wealth as a departure from Benedictine simplicity. The Cluniac network at its height encompassed nearly 1,500 monasteries and priories stretching from Spain to Poland, a testament to the abbey's organizational genius. Cluny's abbots wielded authority akin to princes, advising popes and mediating disputes between secular rulers. During the investiture controversy, Cluny's allegiance to the papacy under Gregory VII bolstered the reformist cause, positioning the abbey as a moral arbiter in a turbulent age. Yet this very prominence sowed seeds of decline. By the mid-12th century, new monastic orders, notably the Cistercians, challenged Cluny's model, advocating a return to austere simplicity. Bernard of Clairvaux, the Cistercians' firebrand, famously criticized Cluny's opulence, arguing that its lavish liturgy and architecture distracted from true spiritual poverty, though Cluny's abbots such as Peter the Venerable, 1122-1156, responded with reforms and intellectual vigor. Peter's correspondence with figures like Bernard in his translations of Islamic texts reflect Cluny's cosmopolitan spirit. The abbey struggled to maintain its preeminence. The 13th and 14th centuries saw Cluny's influence wane as broader forces reshaped Europe. The rise of mendicant orders like the Franciscans and Dominicans, the consolidation of royal power, and the Avignon papacy eroded the abbey's autonomy and relevance. Financial mismanagement and the burdens of maintaining its vast holdings further strained Cluny's resources. The 100 Years' War and the Black Death ravaged Burgundy, disrupting the abbey's economic base and reducing its monastic community. By the 15th century, Cluny was a shadow of its former self, its network fragmented and its abbots increasingly entangled in secular politics. The final blow came with the French Revolution. In 1790, Cluny Abbey was secularized, its monks dispersed, and its vast church looted and dismantled. The once magnificent Cluny III was reduced to ruins, its stones quarried for local buildings, a poignant symbol of the abbey's fall from grace. Yet even in ruin, Cluny's legacy endured. The abbey's influence on Romanesque architecture, monastic reform, and medieval spirituality left an indelible mark on European culture. Its manuscripts scattered across libraries remain treasures of medieval art, and its liturgical innovations shaped the Western Church's worship for centuries. Today, the remnants of Cluny Abbey, its surviving south transept, towers, and cloister, stand as a testament to a millennium of faith, ambition, and resilience. The site, now a museum and archaeological preserve, invites reflection on a world where a single monastery could shape the destiny of a continent. Cluny's story is one of ascent and decline, of spiritual fervor and human frailty, a narrative etched in stone and parchment, echoing through the ages as a monument to the medieval soul. In the heart of the Gâtinais, where the Cléry River carves a gentle path through the rolling landscapes of north-central France, the Abbey of Ferrieres en Gâtinais stands as a silent witness to centuries of faith, learning, and turmoil. Its stones, now reduced to evocative ruins, whisper tales of a Benedictine monastery that once radiated influence across medieval Europe, a beacon of Carolingian scholarship and royal favor, yet scarred by the vicissitudes of war and revolution. The story of Ferrieres Abbey is not merely one of monastic devotion, but a tapestry woven from the threads of cultural ambition, political intrigue, and the relentless passage of time, each era leaving its mark on the sacred precincts that rose from the iron-rich valleys of the Loire. The origins of Ferrieres Abbey are shrouded in the mists of early medieval legend, yet historical clarity emerges around the year 630, during the reign of King Dagobert I. Contrary to local traditions that attribute its founding to Clovis I in 508, supported by a forged charter and the apocryphal Acts of Saint Savinien, the abbey's establishment is more reliably credited to the Irish monk Columbanus or his disciples. This was an era when Irish missionaries, with their ascetic zeal and intellectual vigor, traversed the continent, planting seeds of monasticism in the fertile soil of Merovingian Gaul. Ferrieres, named for the iron ore ferrum abundant in the region, was dedicated to St. Peter and Paul. Its spiritual foundations laid upon a pre-existing chapel to the Virgin Mary, known as Notre-Dame de Bethlehem de Ferrieres. This early sanctuary, described by the 18th century Benedictine Dom Philippe Mazoyer, hints at a sacred continuity, a site where Christian worship had already taken root before the abbey's formal organization. By the dawn of the Carolingian era, Ferrieres had begun to ascend as a center of spiritual and intellectual life. Under the patronage of Charlemagne, the abbey entered a golden age, particularly during the tenure of Alcuin, the Anglo-Saxon scholar and abbot who transformed Ferrieres into a hub of learning. In 1793, Charlemagne entrusted the abbey to Alcuin, whose vision turned its scriptorium into a powerhouse of manuscript production, earning the moniker the New Athens for its rigorous monastic school. Alcuin's pupils, including luminaries like Saint Adon of Vienne and Aldrich, later Archbishop of Sens, carried forward his legacy of scholarship, producing works of theology, astronomy, and humane letters that resonated across the Carolingian Empire. The abbey's library, a treasure trove of classical and patristic texts, became a magnet for scholars, with Abbot Lupus of Ferrieres around 850, elevating its reputation to new heights. Lup, a figure of immense erudition, corresponded with figures like Einhard and Pope Benedict III, tirelessly seeking manuscripts to enrich the abbey's collection, even establishing a copying workshop at the dependent priory of Saint-Jos-sur-Mer. His efforts made Ferrieres a nexus of intellectual exchange, where Cicero's De Oratore and other rare texts found new life through meticulous transcription. The abbey's prominence was not merely intellectual, but also political. In 879, it hoisted the joint coronation of the Carolingian kings Louis III and Carloman II, a testament to its royal favor and strategic importance. Both kings would later be laid to rest within its hallowed walls, their tombs a poignant reminder of Ferrieres' role as a stage for dynastic rituals. The abbey's prosperity was further bolstered by the restorations under Louis the Pious and Charles the Bald in the 9th century, who endowed it with privileges and resources, ensuring its place within the orbit of imperial power. Yet this very prominence made Ferrieres a target. In 880, the abbey welcomed monks fleeing the Viking-ravaged Saint-Martin de Tournai, absorbing their charters and relics, a gesture that underscores its role as a refuge in turbulent times. The medieval centuries brought both glory and calamity. By the 10th century, Ferrieres faced encroachments from local lords, with the Counts of Gâtinais and Sens seizing its lands, as lamented in 997 letter from Abbot Abbon of Fleury to Pope Gregory V. The abbey's fortunes revived under royal protection in the 11th century when Philip I abolished burdensome levies in 1070, and in 1137 Abbot Amaury oversaw the reconstruction of the Basilica of Saint-Pierre et Saint-Paul, consecrated in 1163 by Pope Alexander III during his exile in Sens. This ceremony, attended by a throng of pilgrims, marked a high point with the abbey's architecture, a Latin cross with a Carolingian octagonal rotunda, a nave began around 1150, and a 13th century transept and choir, reflecting a blend of Romanesque solidity and nascent Gothic elegance. The choir's 6-part vault, characteristic of Champagne and Burgundy, and the tympanum depicting Christ in majesty, possibly evoking Clovis, imbued the abbey with a visual theology that spoke to both the divine and the royal. Yet the abbey's resilience was repeatedly tested. The 100 Years' War brought devastation, with English forces torching Ferrieres in 1427, reducing its structures to smoldering ruins. Abbot Louis de Blanchefort, in the late 15th century, undertook a heroic restoration, rebuilding the abbey and earning a tomb in its choir, a symbol of his enduring legacy. The wars of religion delivered another blow in 1568 when Protestant forces under Louis de Condé, allied with the Coligny family, besieged and pillaged the abbey. The reliquaries, treasures, and tombs, including those of Louis III, Carloman II, and Blanchefort, were desecrated, and the monks' stalls were torn away. Odet de Coligny, the abbey's former abbot, turned Protestant, intervened only when its financial interests were threatened, a stark reminder of the era's tangled motives. Despite these ravages, the abbey rose again in the 17th century under Prior Guillaume Morin, who rebuilt its monastic buildings, though the scars of conflict lingered. The final chapter came with the French Revolution, when Ferrieres, like countless ancient abbeys, was swept away in the anti-clerical fervor of late 18th century. Its treasures and library, already diminished, were scattered or destroyed, leaving only fragments, such as a manuscript recalling Saint Eldric, preserved in the Vatican, Reg 1573. By 1802, with the Concordat reorganizing France's ecclesiastical map, Ferrieres passed from the Archdiocese of Sens to the Diocese of Orléans, its former glory reduced to ruins. Today, the abbey church's remnants, a 12th century nave, 13th century choir, and traces of 11th century walls stand as a melancholic testament to its past. The stained glass of the apse, dating from the late 15th century, and the tomb of Louis de Blanchefort endure, as do the adjacent monastic buildings, including the chapter house and St. Elizabeth Chapel, listed as historical monuments. In the heart of Lombardy's Lomellina, where the Po and Sesia rivers converge in a fertile embrace, the Abbey of San Pietro in Brema stands as a weathered sentinel of time, its stones whispering tales of fate, power, and resilience. Its story begins in the early 10th century, a turbulent era when the shadow of Saracen raids darkened the Italian peninsula. The year was around 929, when the monks of the Abbey of Novalesa, fleeing the destruction of their mountain sanctuary in Piedmont, sought refuge under the protection of Adalbert, Marquis of Ivrea. A man of strategic foresight, Adalbert offered them sanctuary in Brema, a site perched on the Costa Rubea, a red-hued hillock commanding the confluence of rivers. This location, both fertile and defensible, was ideal for a monastic community seeking to rebuild. Here, under the leadership of Don Liberto, the last abbot of Novalesa and the first of Brema, the monks established a new monastery dedicated to St. Peter, mirroring the titular devotion of their lost home. The donation formalized by King Hugo of Italy on July 24, 1929, in Pavia, included not only the Church of Sant'Andrea in Turin, now the sanctuary of the Consolata, but also the Curtis of Breme and Pollicino, alongside lands scattered across Piedmont, Liguria, and western Lombardy. Thus the Abbey of San Pietro was born, a Benedictine foundation destined to inherit the spiritual and cultural legacy of Novalesa. The abbey's early years were marked by its privileged status, exempt from episcopal jurisdiction. It answered only to the Pope and the Holy Roman Emperor, a liberty affirmed by successive pontiffs and rulers. Benedict VIII in 1014, Innocent II between 1130 and 1143, Eugene III in 1151, and emperors like Otto III, Conrad II, Henry III, and Otto IV. This autonomy fostered a vibrant monastic life centered on prayer, scholarship, and land stewardship. The monks, guided by the rule of Saint Benedict, cultivated the surrounding Lomellina, transforming its marshy plains into productive fields. Their scriptorium, a beacon of learning, produced the Chronicon Novalicense, a historical text that preserved the memory of their origins and the trials of their exodus. The abbey's crypt, constructed in the mid-10th century, remains its most enduring relic from this period. Measuring just over 11 meters long and 6 meters wide, it is a pre-Romanesque marble divided into 3 narrow naves by 4 cylindrical stone columns, some possibly salvaged from Roman structures in nearby Lomello, and later brick pillars. Its low vaulted ceiling and austere masonry evoke a sacred intimacy, a space where monks once chanted psalms beneath the earth, their voices rising to the heavens. Yet the abbey's history was not one of unbroken serenity. Its strategic location made it a coveted prize in the power struggles of medieval Italy. In 950 it fell under the dominion of Arduin of Susa, and in 1026 Emperor Conrad II briefly deposed Abbot Odilo, granting the monastery to Alberic, Bishop of Como. By 1093 it became a dependency of Pavia, and in 1164 it was subsumed under the Marquess of Montferrat. Despite these shifts, the abbey maintained its independence by 1210, a testament to its enduring prestige. Its holdings stretch across Montferrat, Piedmont, and Lombardy, reflecting its economic and spiritual influence. However, the tides of fortune turned in 1306, when Gian Galeazzo Visconti, the ambitious Duke of Milan, besieged Brema. The abbey, caught in the vortex of Visconti expansionism, suffered significant damage, marking the beginning of a slow decline. The Dukes of Milan transformed Brema into a military outpost, fortifying the post-Lombard bank and prioritizing defense over devotion. The monastic ideal waned as the abbey's sacred spaces were repurposed for secular ends. By the mid-16th century, the abbey's fortunes shifted again with the arrival of the Olivetans, a Benedictine Reform congregation. In 1542, the original Benedictine monks departed for the hermitage of Sant'Alberto di Butrio, and Olivetans took stewardship, suppressing the title of abbot and merging the abbey's assets with those of San Bartolomeo in Strada, Pavia. The Olivetans undertook a significant reconstruction, erecting the current monastic complex around 1550. Centered on a cloister, now the courtyard of Brema's municipal schools, the abbey included adjacent buildings at Via Abbazia San Pietro 11 and a guest house at number 21, linked by an arch bearing the faded Olivetan emblem. A terrace garden close by a wall completed the ensemble, while the abbatial church, oriented eastward toward Jerusalem in the ancient tradition, stood on the cloister's northern edge. Its presbytery, elevated above the crypt, followed Romanesque conventions, though little of this church survives today beyond decorative stucco arches on the northern wall. The Olivetan work, radically restored in the 17th century in the dismantling of Savoy fortifications, imbued the abbey with a new architectural coherence, blending functionality with understated elegance. The Abbey's kitchen, preserved in the basement, offers a glimpse into monastic life. Adjacent to a well, it features a monumental fireplace and masonry stoves where monks once prepared communal meals. The refectory, ice house, and storerooms are also subterranean, reveal the abbey's self-sufficiency with spaces for milling, baking, and storage. These areas, now part of a small museum, resonate with the simplicity of labor of monastic existence. The cloister, with its porticoed walkways, and the nearby parish church of Santa Maria dell'Assunta, predating the abbey and possibly of 9th century origin, further enrich Brema's sacred landscape. An obelisk commemorating St. Charles Borromeo's visit in the 17th century stands as a reminder of the abbey's role as a spiritual hub, visited by luminaries of the Counter-Reformation. The abbey's twilight came under Napoleon. In 1784, Victor Amadeus III of Savoy suppressed the monastery, seizing its assets for the state. The abbatial church, already dilapidated, was demolished during the Napoleonic occupation, leaving the crypt and ancillary buildings the sole remnants of medieval grandeur. The complex, repurposed as Brema's town hall, has since been maintained with care, its crypt meticulously restored to preserve its 10th century character. Today the abbey is open daily with guided tours led by local figures like the mayor, who narrate its history with passion. Visitors can explore the crypt, kitchen, and ice house, often stumbling upon the site by chance, as recounted by travelers during Brema's famous Red Onion Festival. The abbey's survival against the ravages of war, neglect, and time speaks to its enduring significance as a cultural and spiritual anchor in the Lomellina. Brema itself, a quiet village of 700 souls, reflects the abbey's legacy. Its position at the confluence of the Po and Sesia, once a strategic asset, now lends it a serene beauty, enhanced by the fame of its sweet red onions, a denominazione comunale di origine. The abbey, though diminished, remains the town's heart, its crypt, a silent witness to a millennium of fate and upheaval. From its founding amid Saracen threats, its Olivetan revival, and eventual secularization, the Abbey of San Pietro embodies the resilience of sacred spaces in a world of shifting powers. Its stones, columns, and hearths tell a story not just of monks and manuscripts, but of a community that has guarded its heritage through centuries of change, inviting all who visit to step into a past that still breathes. In the heart of central Italy, atop a rocky promontory rising 520 meters above the Liri Valley, stands the Abbey of Monte Cassino, a monument to spiritual resilience and cultural endurance. Founded in 529 AD by Benedict of Nursia, the sacred site marks the cradle of Western monasticism, its history an intricate tapestry woven from threads of fate, destruction, and rebirth. The abbey's story unfolds across 15 centuries, its stones bearing witness to the tides of empire, war, and intellectual flowering, each era leaving its indelible mark on the landscape and the spirit of the place. The origins of Monte Cassino are rooted in the twilight of the Roman Empire, a time when the world seemed to teeter on the edge of collapse. Benedict, born around 480 in Nursia, abandoned the decadence of Rome to seek solitude in the caves of Subiaco. His ascetic life drew disciples, and his vision of a disciplined communal existence under a rule of prayer, work, and study crystallized into the rule of Saint Benedict. Seeking a permanent home for his community, Benedict chose the rugged heights of Monte Cassino, a site already sacred in pre-Christian times. Here, atop a hill once crowned by a temple to Apollo, he established his monastery, transforming a pagan sanctuary into a Christian stronghold. The choice was deliberate. The mountain's isolation offered protection from worldly distractions, while its prominence symbolized a beacon of divine light in a darkening world. By 529, the abbey was founded, its first structures modest but resolute, built to house a community dedicated to ora et labora, prayer and work. The early centuries of Monte Cassino were marked by both spiritual vigor and vulnerability. The rule of Saint Benedict, with its emphasis on balance, obedience, and communal life, spread from Monte Cassino to monasteries across Europe, shaping the spiritual and cultural landscape of the Middle Ages. The abbey became a scriptorium of unparalleled importance, its monks laboriously copying manuscripts that preserved the wisdom of antiquity, texts by Cicero, Virgil, and Ovid alongside Christian writings. Yet its strategic position made it a target. In 577, the Lombards, a Germanic people sweeping through Italy, sacked the abbey, forcing the monks to flee to Rome with the precious rule in hand. For nearly a century, Monte Cassino lay in ruins, its silence broken only by the winds sweeping the Liri Valley. The monks returned in the early 8th century under Petronax of Brescia, rebuilding with renewed purpose, their efforts bolstered by Carolingian patronage under Charlemagne, who saw in Benedict's rule a tool for unifying his sprawling empire. By the 9th century, Monte Cassino had entered a golden age. Under abbots like Carloman and Aligernos, the monastery flourished as a center of learning and artistry. Its scriptorium produced illuminated manuscripts of breathtaking beauty, their intricate designs blending Roman, Byzantine, and Germanic influences. The abbey's library grew, safeguarding classical texts that might otherwise have perished. Monks transcribed works in Beneventan script, a distinctive hand unique to southern Italy, which became a hallmark of Monte Cassino's intellectual legacy. Pilgrims and scholars alike were drawn to the abbey, its reputation as a repository of knowledge and spirituality spreading from beyond the Apennines. Yet this prosperity attracted new threats. In 883, Saracen raiders plundered the abbey, killing Abbot Bertarius and scattering the community once more. The monks sought refuge in Teano and later Capua, their resilience tested but unbroken. The 10th and 11th centuries saw Monte Cassino rise again, its fortunes intertwined with the shifting powers of medieval Italy. Under Abbot Desiderius, late Pope Victor III, 1076-1087, the abbey reached the zenith of its medieval influence. Desiderius, a figure of profound intellect and diplomatic acumen, oversaw a cultural renaissance. He commissioned the rebuilding of the abbey church completed in 1071, a masterpiece of Romanesque architecture adorned with mosaics and frescoes crafted by Byzantine artists from Constantinople. The abbey's scriptorium thrived, producing codices that preserved not only religious texts but also medical treatises, astronomical works, and legal codes. Desiderius's Monte Cassino was a crossroads of cultures where Latin, Greek, and Arabic influences converged, reflecting the cosmopolitan currents of the Mediterranean world. The abbey's influence extended to the Normans, who under Richard of Aversa granted it lands and protection, cementing its role as a spiritual and political power. The High Middle Ages brought both glory and turmoil. Monte Cassino's wealth and prestige made it a prize during the conflicts between the Holy Roman Empire and the papacy. In 1239, Emperor Frederick II, excommunicated and at odds with Pope Gregory IX, occupied the abbey, expelling its monks. Yet the community endured, returning under papal protection. The 14th century brought new challenges. The Black Death decimated the monastic population, and the abbey's fortunes waned as Italy fractured into warring city-states. In 1349, a catastrophic earthquake reduced much of the abbey to rubble, a blow that seemed to mirror the broader instability of the era. The monks, undeterred, rebuilt with characteristic determination, their labor a testament to Benedict's enduring vision. The Renaissance saw Monte Cassino adapt to new intellectual currents. Its library expanded, incorporating humanist texts, while its monks engaged with a burgeoning print culture. However, the 16th and 17th centuries brought decline as the abbey struggled under the weight of commendatory abbots, lay appointees who siphoned off its revenues. The Counter-Reformation reinvigorated its spiritual mission, with reforms strengthening monastic discipline. By the 18th century, Monte Cassino was again a center of scholarship in archives meticulously catalogued. Its influence felt in the courts of Naples and beyond. The 19th century ushered in new trials. During the Napoleonic era, the abbey was suppressed, its land confiscated, and its monks dispersed. The unification of Italy in 1861 brought further secularization, with the new Italian state viewing monastic institutions with suspicion. Yet Monte Cassino survived, its monks quietly maintaining their traditions. The 20th century, however, would test the abbey's resilience as never before. During World War II, Monte Cassino's strategic position made it a focal point of the Allied campaign in Italy. In February 1944, Allied forces, mistakenly believing the abbey was occupied by German troops, bombed it into oblivion. The destruction was catastrophic. Centuries-old manuscripts, artworks, and the abbey's very walls were reduced to rubble. The bombing, later acknowledged as a tragic error, killed monks, civilians, and refugees sheltering within. Yet even this devastation could not extinguish Monte Cassino's spirit. After the war, under Abbot Ildefonso Rea, the abbey was meticulously reconstructed using original plans and salvaged materials. By 1964, it was reconsecrated, a symbol of renewal in a war-torn world. Today, Monte Cassino stands as a living monument to its layered history. Its Romanesque basilica, restored with fidelity to Desiderius' vision, houses relics of Saint Benedict and his sister Scholastica. The library, painstakingly rebuilt, contains over 40,000 volumes, including rare manuscripts that trace the abbey's role as a guardian of knowledge. The monks, fewer in number but steadfast, continue their life of prayer and work, their chants echoing through the cloisters as they have for nearly 15 centuries. The abbey's museum displays fragments of its past Byzantine mosaics, medieval cottages, and relics of the 1944 bombing, each object a testament to survival. Monte Cassino's story is not merely one of endurance, but of transformation, a place where the sacred and the scholarly have intertwined, weathering invasions, disasters, and the passage of time. It remains a pilgrimage site, not only for the faithful, but for those who seek to understand the currents of history that have shaped the Western world, from its founding on a pagan hilltop to its rebirth amid the ruins of war. Monte Cassino endures as a beacon of continuity, its tones whispering the eternal rhythm of ora et labora. In the heart of the Po Valley, where the mists of the Emilia-Romagna plains weave a timeless veil over the land, stands the Abbey of Nonantola, monument to faith, power, and culture that has endured for over 12 centuries. Founded in 752 by St. Anselm, a former Duke of Friuli turned Benedictine monk, the abbey emerged as a beacon of spiritual and intellectual life during the turbulent era of Lombard rule in northern Italy. Its story is one of resilience, adaptation, and profound influence intertwined with the political machinations, religious fervor, and cultural achievements of medieval Europe. The abbey's history unfolds as a tapestry of sacred relics, illuminated manuscripts, Romanesque artistry, and the ebb and flow of imperial and papal ambitions, all set against the backdrop of a landscape shaped by human ingenuity and divine aspiration. The abbey's origins lie in the strategic vision of the Longobard king Aistulf, Anselm's brother-in-law, who gifted a vast tract of marshy land near Modena to establish a monastic stronghold. This was no mere act of piety. It was a calculated move to bolster Longobard influence on the contested border with the Byzantine Exarchate recently conquered, and to promote agricultural reclamation in a region of swamps and forests. Anselm, having renounced his ducal title for a life of ascetic devotion, was appointed the abbey's first abbot by Pope Stephen II, who also bestowed upon it the relics of Saint Sylvester I, the early Christian pope whose legacy lent the monastery its name, San Silvestro de Nonantola. These relics, housed in the main altar, transformed Nonantola into a pilgrimage destination, drawing the faithful to venerate not only Sylvester but also other saints, Anselm himself, Pope Hadrian III, the martyrs Sanesius and Theopompus, and the virgins Fosca and Anseride, whose relics rest in the abbey's evocative crypt, a forest of 64 slender columns crowned with capitals, some of Longobard origin, symbolizing perfection in their geometric harmony. Under Anselm's guidance, Nonantola swiftly rose to prominence as a Benedictine powerhouse. Its scriptorium, established with an initial collection of codices procured by Anselm, became a crucible of pre-Carolingian scholarship, producing over 250 illuminated manuscripts, including treasures like the Evangeliary of Matilda of Tuscany, the Acta Sanctorum, and an 11th century gradual. These works, adorned with intricate calligraphy and vibrant illustrations, reflect the abbey's role as a guardian of knowledge in the age when literacy was a rare privilege. The scriptorium's output, rooted in the development of Carolingian minuscule, bridged classical texts and Christian liturgy, preserving Latin authors, and fostering a cultural renaissance that connected Nonantola to monastic centers like the Reichenau and St. Gall. By the 9th century, the abbey's community swelled to hundreds of monks, its wealth amplified by extensive land holdings across Emilia and Tuscany, managed through a sophisticated system of agricultural estates divided into pars dominica, directly controlled by the monastery, and pars massaricia, leased to tenant farmers. This economic prowess, coupled with its spiritual prestige, made Nonantola a linchpin in a network of imperial monasteries under Charlemagne's Holy Roman Empire. Yet the abbey's early history was not without turmoil. In 756, following Aistulf's death, Anselm was exiled to Monte Cassino by the new Longobard king Desiderius, a reflection of the political volatility that shadowed Nonantola's rise. Charlemagne's conquest of the Longobard kingdom in 774 restored Anselm, who died at the abbey in 803, cementing his legacy as its founder and spiritual anchor. The abbey's fortunes soared under Carolingian patronage, with Charlemagne himself donating properties in Verona and Vicenza, his monogram gracing a diploma of 797. Nonantola became a stage for high diplomacy. In 837, Emperor Lothar I resided there. In 883, Pope Martinus I met Charles the Fat. And in 885, Pope Adrian III was buried within its walls. However, the 9th century also brought devastation as Hungarian raiders sacked the abbey in 899, a blow that tested its resilience but did not diminish its enduring significance. By the 10th century, Nonantola stood among Europe's preeminent Benedictine abbeys, rivaling Cluny and Canterbury in wealth and influence. Its archive, preserving over 4,500 parchments, 131 predating the year 1000, offers a window into its economic and political clout, documenting transactions, privileges, and disputes. The abbey's role in land reclamation transformed the Modenese plains, turning marshes into fertile fields and pastures, a legacy embodied in the Participanza Agraria, a medieval institution granting local farmers collective rights to abbey lands, which persisted into the 20th century. Yet its imperial ties brought challenges. As an imperial monastery, Nonantola suffered from interference in abbatial elections, a source of internal discord until the investiture controversy of the 11th century shifted its allegiance. Initially siding with the emperor, the abbey was compelled to align with the papacy in 1083 under the influence of Matilda of Tuscany, whose donation in 1108, marked by her distinctive signum, enriched its treasury. In 1111, the monk Placidus of Nonantola penned De Honore Ecclesiae, a forceful defense of papal authority, signaling the abbey's firm commitment to the Gregorian reform. The Romanesque basilica, rebuilt after a 1117 earthquake, remains a testament to Nonantola's artistic zenith. Its imposing brick structure, punctuated by a portal adorned with marble carvings by the school of Viligelmo, narrates the abbey's founding and Christ's nativity in intricate reliefs. The lunette, attributed to Viligelmo himself, depicts God enthroned, flanked by angels and evangelists, while the crypt's columns create a mesmerizing interplay of light and shadow. The abbey's treasury, housed in the Benedictine and Diocesan Museum of Sacred Art, preserves relics of unparalleled significance. A stauroteca containing a fragment of the True Cross, brought from Constantinople, and rare 9th century textiles discovered in 2002. Paintings by Cosme and Ludovico Carracci alongside Samite fabrics for the abbey's early years underscore its role as a patron of sacred art. The abbey's fortunes waned from the 13th century as Modena and Bologna vied for control, erecting the Modenese in 1261 and Bolognese 1307 towers as symbols of their dominance. By 1419, under commendatory abbots, Nonantola entered a period of decline, exacerbated by its transfer to the Cistercians in 1514. The suppression of religious orders during the Napoleonic era stripped the abbey of its territories, which passed to secular hands, and in 1866, the Italian government appropriated the monastery, repurposing parts for the town hall. Despite these setbacks, Pope Pius VII restored it in 1821, uniting its prelature with the Archbishopric of Modena in 1986. The 2012 earthquake forced another closure, but the abbey's reopening in 2018 revealed restored frescoes and terracotta basins, reviving its medieval splendor. Nonantola's legacy extends beyond its walls. During World War II, the townspeople sheltered 73 Jewish children at Villa Emma, facilitating their escape to Switzerland, an act of courage honored with a Cross of War medal. Today, the abbey stands as a co-cathedral of the Diocese of Modena-Nonantola, its museum and archives drawing scholars and pilgrims alike. Its Romanesque grandeur, cultural treasures, and historical resilience embody a continuum of faith and intellect, a silent witness to the interplay of power, piety, and artistry that has shaped the Po Valley for over a millennium. In the heart of the Hessian landscape, where the Fulda River carves its gentle path through rolling hills and ancient forests, the Abbey of Fulda emerged as a beacon of spiritual and intellectual life in early medieval Europe. Founded in 744 by Sturmi, a disciple of the Anglo-Saxon missionary Boniface, the abbey was not merely a monastic outpost, but a cornerstone of Carolingian ambition, a crucible of Christian devotion, and a repository of learning that shaped the cultural and religious contour of the Holy Roman Empire. Its story is one of resilience, adaptation, and profound influence woven into the fabric of a turbulent millennium. The origins of Fulda Abbey lie in the missionary zeal of Boniface, the apostle of the Germans who sought to anchor Christianity in the pagan heartlands of Germania. In 742, Boniface, then bishop and papal legate, dispatched his trusted follower Sturmi to scout a suitable location for a monastery that would serve as a spiritual and administrative hub. Sturmi, a Bavarian monk trained in the Benedictine tradition, selected a site along the Fulda River, a place of serene beauty but also strategic importance, nestled in a region where Frankish influence was still contested by Saxon and Slavic tribes. On March the 12th, 744, with the blessing of Boniface and the support of the Frankish mayor of the palace, Carloman, the first monks broke ground, erecting a modest oratory dedicated to St. Peter. This act marked the birth of Fulda, monastery conceived as a bulwark of Christian orthodoxy in Frankish hegemony. Under Sturmi's abbacy, Fulda grew rapidly from a humble foundation into a thriving monastic community. The rule of Saint Benedict, with its emphasis on ora et labora, prayer and work, governed the monks' lives, structuring their days around communal worship, manual labor, and the copying of manuscripts. Boniface's vision for Fulda was ambitious. It was to be a center of missionary activity, radiating Christian teaching in the surrounding regions. The abbey's early years were marked by its role in the conversion of the Saxons, a task that often placed it at the crossroads of spiritual and political conflict. Boniface himself, martyred in 754 at Docum while preaching to the Frisians, left Fulda as his enduring legacy, entrusting it with the task of continuing his work. The Carolingian dynasty, particularly under Charlemagne, elevated Fulda to new heights. In 751, Fulda received a papal privilege from Pope Zacharias, granting it exemption from episcopal oversight and placing it directly under the authority of Rome, a rare and coveted status that underscored its importance. Charlemagne, who saw monasteries as instruments of cultural and political unification, showered Fulda with endowments, including vast tracts of land that made it one of the wealthiest foundations in the Frankish realm. By the late 8th century, Fulda's estates sprawled across modern-day Hesse, Thuringia, and Franconia, supporting a community of hundreds of monks and lay laborers. The abbey's scriptorium became a powerhouse of manuscript production, preserving classical texts and producing theological works that shaped Carolingian intellectual life. The Annales Fuldenses, a chronicle begun in the 9th century, stands as a testament to Fulda's role as a historical and cultural archive recording the deeds of Frankish kings and the unfolding of imperial history. The 9th century marked Fulda's golden age under abbots like Rabanus Maurus, a towering figure of the Carolingian Renaissance. Rabanus, abbot from 822 to 844, was a scholar of immense erudition, often called the Preceptor Germaniae, the teacher of Germany. Under his leadership, Fulda's school became a magnet for the brightest minds of the era, training clerics who would serve as bishops, abbots, and advisors across the empire. Rabanus oversaw the production of illuminated manuscripts, such as the Fulda Sacramentary, whose intricate artistry reflected the abbey's wealth and sophistication. He also composed biblical commentaries, hymns, and treatises, embedding Fulda in the intellectual currents of the time. The abbey's library, enriched with texts from Rome, Constantinople, and the British Isles, became a treasure trove of knowledge, preserving works by Cicero, Augustine, and Bede alongside Carolingian originals. Yet Fulda's prominence came with challenges. Its wealth and influence made it a target during periods of political instability. The Viking raids of the 9th and 10th centuries, though less devastating in inland Hesse than on the coasts, brought insecurity, while internal Carolingian rivalries occasionally disrupted monastic life. The abbey's exemption from episcopal control also sparked tensions with local bishops who resented its autonomy. Nevertheless, Fulda's abbots navigated these challenges with diplomatic skill, maintaining the monastery's privileges while fostering alliances with secular and ecclesiastical powers. The 10th and 11th centuries saw Fulda adapt to the shifting dynamics of the Ottonian and Salian dynasties. The abbey remained a key player in imperial politics, with its abbots often serving as confidants to emperors. Otto I, crowned Holy Roman Emperor in 962, visited Fulda and reinforced its role as a spiritual center, commissioning new buildings and relics to enhance its prestige. The abbey's church, rebuilt in the 9th century to emulate St. Peter's in Rome, became a pilgrimage site, housing the relics of Boniface, whose tomb drew devotees seeking miracles. The Vita Bonifazi, composed at Fulda, further cemented the saint's cult, intertwining the abbey's identity with his martyrdom. The High Middle Ages brought both prosperity and transformation. Fulda's economic base, rooted in vast estates, supported agricultural innovation, including the three fields system and water mills, which sustained the growing population of monks and dependents. The abbey's market, granted imperial privileges, became a hub of regional trade, linking Fulda to the wider European economy. Culturally, Fulda remained a center of learning, though its scriptorium faced competition from newer monastic foundations like Cluny and Gorz. The 12th century saw the rise of the Cistercian order, whose ascetic ideals challenged the Benedictine opulence of Fulda. In response, Fulda's monks undertook reforms to align with the spirit of the age, emphasizing simplicity while preserving their intellectual traditions. The later Middle Ages tested Fulda's resilience. The Black Death of the 14th century decimated its community, while economic pressures and the fragmentation of imperial authorities strained its resources. The abbey's abbots increasingly relied on secular alliances to protect their interests, a strategy that sometimes entangled Fulda in regional conflicts. By the 15th century, the rise of territorial princes, particularly the landgraves of Hesse, began to erode Fulda's autonomy. The abbey's status as an imperial principality, granted in the 13th century, gave its abbots princely rank, but this also drew them into the orbit of secular politics, blurring the lines between spiritual and temporal authority. The Reformation brought Fulda to a crossroads. As Protestantism swept through Germany, Fulda remained a Catholic stronghold, its abbots staunchly defending the old faith. The abbey's loyalty to Rome, however, came at a cost. Protestant princes coveted its lands, and internal dissent among the monks, some of whom sympathized with reformist ideas, created tensions. The Council of Trent, 1545-1563, reinvigorated Fulda's Catholic identity, with abbots like Balthasar von Dernbach implementing Tridentine reforms, strengthening discipline, and restoring the abbey's liturgical splendor. Yet the 30 Years' War 1618-1648 brought devastation, as Fulda's strategic location made it a target for both Catholic and Protestant armies. The abbey was sacked multiple times, its treasures looted, and its community dispersed. The Baroque era saw Fulda's revival under abbots like Johann Friedrich von Schwalbach, who rebuilt the abbey's church in a resplendent Baroque style, symbolizing Catholic triumph in the Counter-Reformation. In the new cathedral, completed in 1712 with its soaring domes and ornate frescoes, remains a testament to this era of renewal. Fulda's princes abbots, now wielding both spiritual and secular authority, governed a small ecclesiastical state complete with a court, bureaucracy, and militia. The Abbey's school and library continued to attract scholars, while its music and liturgy rivaled the great courts of Europe. The 19th century brought the final chapter of Fulda's monastic history. The secularization of 1802, driven by Napoleonic reforms, dissolved the Abbey's princely status, transferring its land to the Prince of Orange-Nassau, and later to the Grand Duchy of Hesse. The monastic community was suppressed, and the Abbey's treasures scattered, yet Fulda's legacy endured. In 1836, the Catholic Church re-established the episcopal see of Fulda, transforming the former Abbey church into a cathedral. The Bonifatius Kloster, founded in 1890, revived the Benedictine presence, ensuring that the spiritual traditions of Sturmi and Boniface lived on. Today, Fulda Abbey's cathedral and surrounding buildings stand as a palimpsest of history, their stones bearing witness to over 12 centuries of faith, learning, and resilience. The tomb of Boniface, still venerated, anchors the site in its missionary origins, while the Baroque grandeur of the cathedral speaks to its later triumphs. Fulda's manuscripts, many now housed in museums and libraries, remain a vital link to the Carolingian past, their dedicated script a reminder of the monks who labored to preserve knowledge in an age of uncertainty. The Abbey's story, dense with the interplay of piety, power, and intellect, reflects the broader currents of European history, a testament to a community that, though through centuries of upheaval, remained a steadfast guardian of the sacred and the scholarly. In the heart of the Val di Susa, where the Piedmontese Alps rise like silent sentinels over the plains of northern Italy, the Sacra di San Michele stands as a monument to faith, resilience, and the enduring interplay of human ambition and divine inspiration. Perched atop Monte Pirchiriano, its rugged stone walls seem to grow organically from the craggy summit, a testament to the audacity of its founders and the sanctity of its purpose. This ancient abbey, dedicated to the Archangel Michael, is not merely a structure but a living chronicle of a millennium, woven into the fabric of medieval Christendom, the aspirations of pilgrims and the cultural currents of the Alpine frontier. Its story is one of spiritual fervor, architectural ingenuity, and historical convergence unfolding across centuries of devotion, conflict, and renewal. The origins of the Sacra di San Michele are shrouded in the mists of late antiquity, rooted in the veneration of Saint Michael, the warrior archangel whose cult spread across Europe in the wake of the Roman Empire's collapse. By the late 10th century, the Val di Susa, a vital corridor linking Italy to the Frankish realms, was a crossroads of trade, pilgrimage, and power. It was here, around 983, that a wealthy nobleman, Giovanni Vincenzo, former bishop of Ravenna, sought to expiate his sins through an act of profound devotion. Tradition holds that Giovanni, guided by a vision, or perhaps by the weight of his own contrition, chose the isolated peak of Monte Pirchiriano to establish a hermitage dedicated to the Archangel. The choice of site was no accident. Michael, protector of high places and guardian against evil, was venerated on lofty summits across Christendom, from Mont Saint-Michel in Normandy to Monte Gargano in Apulia. The rugged, windswept promontory of Pirchiriano, rising 962 meters above the valley, was a natural altar, a place where earth and heaven seemed to converge. The earliest structure was modest, a small chapel carved into the rock, tended by hermits who lived in ascetic solitude. Yet the site's strategic and spiritual significance soon attracted the attention of the Benedictine order, whose monks transformed the hermitage into a thriving monastic complex. By the early 11th century, under the patronage of the Arduinici, a powerful local dynasty, the Sacra began to take shape as a fortified abbey, its walls rising in harmony with the mountain's contour. The Benedictines, with their disciplined communal life and commitment to the ore labora ethos, brought stability and purpose to the fledgling monastery. The abbey's position along the Via Francigena, the great pilgrimage route connecting Canterbury to Rome, ensured a steady flow of travelers, merchants, and pilgrims, each leaving their mark on the growing community. The monks offered hospitality, spiritual guidance, and protection, their abbey a beacon of refuge in a turbulent age. The architectural evolution of the Sacra di San Michele mirrors the broader currents of medieval Europe. The Romanesque core of the abbey, constructed between the 11th and the 12th centuries, reflects the austere yet profound aesthetic of the period. The church, with its robust arches and intricately carved capitals, embodies the Romanesque ideal of solidity and divine order. The Porta dello Zodiaco, a masterpiece of 12th century sculpture, reveals the cultural sophistication of the abbey's patrons and artisans. Its reliefs depicting the signs of the zodiac alongside biblical scenes speak to a worldview that intertwines celestial rhythms with sacred history, a testament to the medieval synthesis of classical learning and Christian theology. The abbey's crypt, with its ancient columns and subterranean chapels, evokes the primal sanctity of the original hermitage, while the soaring Scalone dei Morti, the stairway of the dead, bears witness to the monks' contemplation of mortality. Its name derived from the niches once used to display the remains of deceased brethren. Throughout the Middle Ages, the Sacra di San Michele was more than a spiritual haven. It was a nexus of power and culture. The abbey's strategic location made it a coveted prize for the competing factions of the Holy Roman Empire and emerging Italian city-states. The Counts of Savoy, who rose to prominence in the 11th century, became its chief patrons, endowing it with lands and privileges. Under their protection, the abbey flourished as a center of learning, its scriptorium producing manuscripts that preserved the wisdom of antiquity and the theology of the Church. Monks copied texts ranging from Augustine to Boethius, their work illuminated by the flickering light of candles in the alpine twilight. The abbey's library, though diminished by time, was once a repository of knowledge, drawing scholars and scribes from across the peninsula. Yet the Sacra was not immune to the vicissitudes of history. By the 13th and 14th centuries brought challenges that tested its resilience. The decline of the Via Francigena, coupled with the rise of urban centers like Turin, shifted economic and political focus away from the Val di Susa. The Black Death, sweeping through Europe in the mid-14th century, likely decimated the monastic community, leaving the abbey vulnerable to neglect and decay. By the 15th century, the Sacra had entered a period of decline, its once vibrant community reduced to a handful of monks. The rise of the Renaissance, with its emphasis on humanism and secular power, further marginalized the abbey, as the Church's influence waned in the face of the new intellectual currents. The turning point came in the 17th century, when the Sacra faced near abandonment. The House of Savoy, now a major European power, intervened to restore the abbey's fortunes. In 1622, the monastery was entrusted to the Rusminian Fathers, a religious congregation founded by Antonio Rusmini, whose intellectual rigor and spiritual zeal breathed new life into the community. The Rusminians oversaw a period of renewal, repairing the abbey's crumbling structures and rekindling its spiritual mission. Their efforts ensured that the Sacra remained a living institution even as the Enlightenment and the Napoleonic Wars reshaped the European landscape. The 19th century brought new challenges and opportunities. The unification of Italy in 1861 placed the Sacra within a secular state, raising questions about the role of monastic institutions in a modern nation, yet the abbey's historical and cultural significance ensured its survival. Scholars and antiquarians, drawn to its Romanesque architecture and medieval heritage, began to study and celebrate the Sacra as a national treasure. The abbey's dramatic setting and evocative ruins inspired artists and writers, including Umberto Eco, who is said to have drawn inspiration from its austere beauty for his novel The Name of the Rose. The Sacra's mystique, amplified by its association with the Archangel Michael and its perch atop Monte Percheriano, made it a symbol of Italy's spiritual and cultural past. Today, the Sacra di San Michele stands as a living monument, its stones bearing the weight of 1,000 years of history. The abbey remains an active religious community, its monks continuing the Benedictine tradition of prayer and hospitality. Pilgrims and tourists alike ascend the winding paths to its gates, drawn to the promise of spiritual reflection and the breathtaking vistas of the Val di Susa. The abbey's annual festivals, including the Feast of St. Michael on September the 29th, draw thousands, their chants and processions echoing the rituals of centuries past. The Sacra's cultural legacy endures through concerts, exhibitions, and scholarly conferences, which celebrate its role as a crossroads of faith, art, and history. To stand within the Sacra di San Michele is to feel the pulse of the ages. Its walls, weathered by time and the elements, speak of the hermits who first sought solitude on this mountain, the monks who built a sanctuary of stone and spirit, and the pilgrims who carried their hopes and fears along the Via Francigena. The Abbey's history is a tapestry of devotion and endurance woven from the threads of countless lives, nobles and peasants, scholars and warriors, sinners and saints. In its shadowed clusters and soaring arches, one senses the eternal dialogue between the human and the divine, a dialogue that continues to resonate in the heart of the Alps, where the Sacra di San Michele stands as a beacon of the past and a promise of continuity. In the heart of the Apennine Mountains, where the dense forests of Tuscany weave a tapestry of shadow and light, the Camaldoli Monastery stands as a testament to a spiritual and intellectual odyssey that spans over a millennium. Its story, etched into the rugged landscape and the annals of Christian monasticism, is one of solitude, reform, and a relentless pursuit of divine communion, tempered by the cultural and historical currents of medieval and Renaissance Italy. The Camaldoli, founded by Saint Romuald in the early 11th century, is not merely a place, but a living tradition, a confluence of ascetic rigor and humanistic inquiry, shaped by the interplay of faith, nature, and the evolving tides of European civilization. The origins of Camaldoli trace back to the year 1012, when Romuald, a restless and visionary monk from Ravenna, sought a path to reconcile the solitary impulses of hermitic life with the communal discipline of Cenobitic monasticism. Born into a noble family around 951, Romuald had abandoned worldly privilege for a life of penance and contemplation, driven by a profound dissatisfaction with the moral laxity he perceived in the monasteries of his time. The early 11th century was a period of spiritual ferment in Europe, as the Church grappled with corruption, simony, and the secular ambitions of feudal lords. Romuald, influenced by the Cluniac reforms but seeking a more radical return to the Desert Fathers' austerity, wandered through Italy, founding small hermitages and inspiring disciples with his charismatic fervor. It was in the wild, forested valley of the Casentino near Arezzo that he found the ideal setting for his vision, a remote, verdant expanse where the soul could commune with God amid the silence of nature. The Camaldoli Monastery, named after the field donated by a local nobleman, Maldolo, was established as a dual foundation, a hermitage for solitary monks and a cenobium for those living in community. This innovative structure reflected Romuald's genius, blending the hermitic ideal of isolation with the cenobitic emphasis of shared liturgy and labor. The hermitage, situated higher in the mountains, consisted of individual cells where monks lived in solitude, emerging only for communal worship on Sundays and feast days. Below, the monastery fostered a more traditional monastic life, with its scriptorium, refectory, and church dedicated to Saint Donatus. This dual model was not merely practical but philosophical, embodying a balance between the individual's quest for God and the communal bonds that sustain spiritual discipline. The rule of Romuald, though less formalized than that of Saint Benedict, emphasized poverty, silence, and contemplation, with a distinctive focus on the threefold good: solitude, community, and mission. The early years of Camaldoli were marked by its rapid growth and the challenges of maintaining Romuald's vision. After his death around 1027, his disciple, Blessed Peter Damian, played a crucial role in consolidating the order. A towering figure of the 11th century church, Peter Damian brought intellectual rigor and reformist zeal to Camaldoli, defending its hermetic ideals against critics who saw solitude as incompatible with Christian charity. His writings, including the Vita Romualdi, not only preserved the founder's legacy, but also articulated a theology of solitude that resonated with the broader reform movements of the era, such as the Gregorian reforms. Under his influence, Camaldoli became a beacon of spiritual renewal, attracting monks from across Italy and beyond who sought to escape the world's tumult in the embrace of the forest. By the 12th century, Camaldoli had evolved into a significant monastic order known as the Camaldoles, with daughter houses spreading across Italy and into the Holy Roman Empire. Its governance was formalized under the constitutions of Blessed Rudolf, a prior who codified the balance between hermitage and monastery, ensuring that the Camaldoles remained distinct from the Benedictines and the later Cistercians. The monastery's scriptorium became a hub of intellectual activity, producing manuscripts that preserved classical and patristic texts, a vital contribution during an era when Europe was rediscovering its intellectual heritage. The monks, trained in the liberal arts, engaged in theological debates and corresponded with scholars, reflecting the Camaldoles' commitment to a spirituality informed by reason and learning. The cultural and historical significance of Camaldoli deepened in the late Middle Ages and the Renaissance as it navigated the complexities of a changing world. The 13th and 14th centuries brought challenges. The rise of mendicant orders like the Franciscans and Dominicans shifted attention to urban ministry, while the Black Death and political upheavals in Tuscany test the monastery's resilience. Yet the Camaldoli adapted, its monks serving as mediators in local disputes and its library growing as a repository of knowledge. The Renaissance, with its revival of classical learning and artistic innovation, found receptive home in Camaldoli. The monastery's connections with Florence, the epicenter of Renaissance culture, fostered exchanges with humanists like Marsilio Ficino and Pico della Mirandola. The Camaldolese monk Ambrogio Traversari, a key figure in the early 15th century, exemplified this synthesis of faith and humanism. A scholar of Greek and Latin, Traversari translated patristic texts and participated in the Council of Florence, 1439, where he advocated for the reunion of Eastern and Western churches, embodying Camaldoli's role as a bridge between tradition and modernity. The monastery's physical setting, too, became a canvas for artistic expression. The church of Saints Donatus and Hilarius, rebuilt in the 13th century, featured frescoes and altarpieces that reflected the evolving aesthetics of Tuscan art. From the austere beauty of Gothic to the luminous clarity of the early Renaissance, the Hermitage, with its simple cells arranged in a grid-like pattern, remained a stark contrast to the opulence of urban churches, yet its very simplicity inspired artists and poets who saw in Camaldoli a reflection of the divine order. The surrounding forest, meticulously managed by the monks, supplied timber and medicinal herbs, sustaining both the community and its reputation for environmental stewardship, a practice that anticipated modern ecological awareness. The Counter-Reformation in the Baroque era brought new challenges and opportunities. The Camaldoles, while remaining true to their eremitic roots, engaged with the Tridentine reforms, emphasizing catechesis and sacramental life. The monastery's pharmacy, established in the 16th century, became renowned for its herbal remedies, drawing pilgrims and scholars alike. By the 18th century, however, the Enlightenment and secularizing trends posed threats to monastic life. The suppression of religious orders under Napoleon in the early 19th century briefly disrupted Camaldoli's continuity, with monks dispersed and properties confiscated. Yet the community endured, restored in the post-Napoleonic era as a symbol of resilience. In the modern era, Camaldoli has remained a vital center of spirituality and culture. The 20th century saw the monastery engage with ecumenical and interreligious dialogues, reflecting its historical openness to broader intellectual currents. The Camaldolese monks, still adhering to Romuald's vision, have welcomed lay retreatants and scholars, fostering a renewed appreciation of contemplative life in a frenetic world. The monastery's library, with its collection of ancient manuscripts and incunabula, continues to attract researchers, while its forest management practices have earned recognition as a model of sustainable ecology. Today, Camaldoli stands as a living monument to a millennium of spiritual and intellectual endeavor. Its history is not merely a chronicle of building and dates, but a narrative of human longing for transcendence shaped by the interplay of solitude and community, faith and reason, nature and culture. The monastery, nestled in its ancient forest, remains a place where the silence speaks, where the legacy of Romuald and his successors endures, as a call to seek the divine in the stillness of the heart and the beauty of the world. In the heart of Tuscany, where the Apennine foothills rise in verdant splendor, lies Vallombrosa, a place where the sacred and the sylvan intertwine, weaving a tapestry of spiritual devotion, cultural richness, and natural majesty. Its name derived from the Latin Vallis Umbrosa, the shaded valley. evokes the dense canopy of beech and fir that cloaks the landscape, forest so ancient and profound, it seems to whisper the secrets of the centuries. Here, amidst the murmuring brooks and towering trees, a story unfolds, one that stretches across a millennium, shaped by fate, art, intellect, and the relentless passage of time. The origins of Vallombrosa trace back to the early 11th century, when a Florentine nobleman, Giovanni Gualberto, sought solace from the tumult of his worldly existence. Born into the fractious society of Florence around the year 995, Gualberto's life was marked by a pivotal moment of divine reckoning. Tradition holds that after sparing the life of his brother's murderer in a gesture of radical forgiveness, he was drawn to the ascetic solitude of the Benedictine monastery of San Miniato. Yet finding the urban monastery too entwined with the corruptions of simony and secular influence, Gualberto ventured into the wilderness of the Pratomagno slopes in 1036. There, in a place then called Acquabella, he joined two hermits in a small wooden oratory, a humble refuge beneath a giant beech tree that, according to legend, sheltered him during a tempest. This act of divine providence inspired the foundation of Vallombrosa, a sanctuary dedicated to simplicity, poverty, and contemplation, principles that would define the Vallombrosan order. By 1038, the community had grown, and the Abbess Itta of the nearby Sant'Elero Monastery donated land for a permanent settlement. The first stone church, consecrated in 1058 by Cardinal Umberto di Silva Candida, marked the transition from a hermit's retreat to a burgeoning monastic center. Under Gualberto's guidance, the Vallombrosan order emerged as a reformist force within Benedictine monasticism, fiercely opposing ecclesiastical corruption and advocating for a return to evangelical poverty. By 1090, nearly 2 decades after Gualberto's death in 1073, the order boasted 15 monasteries, a testament to its spiritual and organizational vitality. The earliest hagiographies, penned by Andrea da Strumi and Atto, Bishop of Pistoia, immortalized Gualberto's sanctity, cementing Vallombrosa's place as a beacon of reform in a turbulent era. The abbey's physical form evolved alongside its spiritual mission. The 12th century bell tower, austere and resolute, rose as a symbol of permanence, while the 13th century saw the construction of a larger church, completed in 1230, its T-shaped plan reflecting the Vallombrosan preference for simplicity. The 15th century brought significant expansion under Abbot Francesco Altoviti, who oversaw the creation of the grand cloister, sacristy, refectory, and fortified tower completed in 1476. Under Biagio Milanesi, a cultured abbot, the abbey became a repository of artistic treasures adorned with works like Perugino's Assumption, later moved to the Uffizi, Raffaellino del Garbo's Panel, and Luca della Robbia's Terracotta. These additions reflected the Renaissance's burgeoning influence, blending spiritual reverence with artistic sophistication. Yet Vallombrosa's history was not without tribulation. In 1529, the abbey suffered looting during the sack by Charles V's forces, prompting the construction of a defensive east tower. The 17th century brought further transformation with Gerardo Silvani's designs for the novitiate and church facade completed between 1637 and 1644, lending the abbey of harmonious elegance. The Baroque interior, shaped between 1729 and 1733 with plaster-covered stone walls and classical altars, celebrated the order's saints, including San Giovanni Gualberto and San Pietro Igneo, through vivid frescoes and paintings by artists like Agostino Veracini and Niccolò Lapi. The abbey's fortunes wavered with the tides of history. The Napoleonic suppression of 1808 stripped Vallombrosa of its possessions, and the monks were expelled in 1810, only returning briefly in 1818 before facing further eviction in 1866 under the new Kingdom of Italy's secularization laws. The monastery was repurposed as the Royal National Forestry Institute from 1867 to 1913, a nod to the monks' historical stewardship of the surrounding forest, which had provided timber for Florence's palaces, and even the first Italian Masonic lodge in the 15th century. The Vallombrosan monks displaced to Pescia did not return until 1949, reclaiming their spiritual home after decades of upheaval. Vallombrosa's forest, a biogenetic reserve since 1977, is as much of a protagonist in its story as the abbey itself. Spanning over 1,200 hectares, it harbors Italy's tallest tree, the 62.45-meter Douglas fir, and has long been a site of ecological and spiritual symbiosis. The monks, known as forest monks, codified forestry techniques, managing silver firs with a method of clear-cutting and delayed regeneration. This stewardship earned San Giovanni Gualberto the patronage of the Italian Forestry Corps. The forest's mystique also drew literary pilgrims inspired by John Milton's evocative reference in Paradise Lost to, quote, autumnal leaves that strow in the brooks in Vallombrosa. Though Milton's visit remained unconfirmed, his words sparked a wave of romantic travelers, William Wordsworth, Mary Shelley, Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and Friedrich Nietzsche among them, who sought the abbey's shaded solitude, weaving it into the poetry and prose. The abbey's cultural legacy extends beyond literature. In 1575-78, a young Galileo Galilei studied under the monks, his early intellectual exercises hinting at the scientific genius that would later challenge orthodoxy. The Antica Pharmacia, testament of the monks' alchemical expertise, continues to produce herbal teas, liqueurs, and the legendary dry gin of Vallombrosa crafted from ancient recipes. Pope Urban II's 1096 sermon at the Abbey, calling for knights to join the First Crusade, underscores its historical role as a nexus of spiritual and political influence. In the 19th century, Vallombrosa's allure as a health resort grew with the construction of a carriage road in 1877 and the Croce di Savoia Hotel, later the Grand Hotel Vallombrosa, attracting luminaries like Gabriele D'Annunzio and Donna Franca Florio. Today, Vallombrosa remains a living monument, its Romanesque and Gothic architecture softened by Baroque embellishments, its library a trove of medieval manuscripts, and its forest a haven for contemplation. The 7 monks who reside there uphold a tradition of prayer and service, while the abbey welcomes visitors to its guided tours, offering glimpses into a history where faith, art, and nature converge. From Gualberto's hermitage to its role as a cultural and spiritual lodestar, Vallombrosa endures as a testament of Tuscany's enduring capacity to inspire, its shaded valley a mirror of the human quest for meaning amidst the eternal rhythms of the earth.